of a precursor to winter that's coming. So our first frost typically shows up around Halloween. Now last year it was mid-November, I believe, November 14th, as I recall, was the first frost, killing frost. And then it just got freezing, by the first week in December, we get our first freeze. And so it's a progression into winter. Well, some of these plants you can actually bring indoors and store, like your geraniums, your sweet potato vines, I would say passion vines. There's a lot of really good plants you can bring indoors and store them in the garage, in the crawl space. I've got some neighbors, they take their geraniums, as soon as they see that first frost, they'll just whack them off and store them in the crawl space, water them in real good, and they forget about them all winter. Now I advise taking a little more care than that, but that does work for some folks. If it's cool enough, they just kind of hibernate down there. They'll bring them out in April, fertilize them, they start coming back for them. Or you can do what Lisa and I do. We've got family down the valley, and so we just, around the end of, we have a big family party, only to exchange plants. And so they'll bring up the minivans and the trucks, and they'll take all those plants and they store them down on their patios down there, and then we get them back, usually around Mother's Day party. They'll all come up here and we'll have them, we'll get them back. And so we've got geraniums that are monsters. Agnes that are just huge. Some plants that are really quite nice. Some of these things mature much nicer, much fuller, and they bloom nicely that way too. So there's an advantage to it. So we're going around the process, how to do that, and then we'll go over how to clean up pots. Sometimes they look kind of ratty this time of year. We'll show you how a quick trick on how to clean them up. Well, come on in. There's a handout right in the back. And then show you some of the new plants that are starting to show up. So we've got a brand new winter collection that look good in containers. If you don't want to take those marigolds out, you don't want zinnias, just aren't worth it. They're too easy to seed or start by a plug and have big, but there might be a big plant out there that just is empty, the planter. You can plug them in with a few plants that will keep it looking good. Some plants you can actually garden in right through the winter. And that's what Lisa and I do. We don't bring our plants in. We just have 4 plants that go right through winter. And then we accessorize some of those plants. We put in cool season plants, or we'll put in our heat loving plants. We make the transition in October. Usually at the end of April, May, we make those transition plants. So we'll go over some of that. You've got a handout here. This is an article I wrote 2 or 3 years ago on this subject. So I thought, well, here's a foundational. I won't read it to you, but I'll give you highlights of things to kind of look at here. I put a picture at the top just going, sometimes you just don't want to have any plants at all. I'm harvesting my pumpkins and I use those as decorations. I grow them not to make pies. They're just pretty funky, weird, squatty, white, different gourds and pumpkins. I grow those because they're just fun. They look Jurassic Park-like as they take over the garden, set huge fruits. I'll pick those and I'll keep them out on the posts. I'll keep them at the front entrance, or I'll just set them into a pot. This happens to be one pot. It's an idea. You don't have to actually garden them year-round. You can simply take picks, fresh cut greens, stick them in the soil, and they look really pretty. Decorative, designer-esque. Of course, my wife, she's an old florist, so she's not an old florist. She's a young, vibrant florist, but she made her way through college as a florist, and so she's got this way of decorating. And so those are some ideas. Just think outside the box sometimes. I think of October as the decorating season. This is when we bring out our scarecrows and those moss, pumpkins, just decorations. We decorate almost more for fall and Thanksgiving as we do for Christmas at our house. It's just fun. And it's a transition because we're going to get our killing frost that'll wipe out those things that you don't bring inside. It'll just take them right out. One night it'll just be gone. It'll turn to brown to black mush as the frost takes them, unless you bring them indoors. So welcome, folks. First thing to do would be those things you're going to bring indoors. Number one, bring them into a shady spot. We've got to transition them into shade because they're going to be indoors or in a place that's protected. So bring them close to the house on the north side, underneath the tree, someplace like that. Get them used to that shaded area. Generally, I'll try to do that for 5 to 7 days, or so, about a week. I'll just put them out there. While they're there, I'll clean them up. So number 2 would be give them a haircut. You gotta shape them. Take all those yellow leaves, things that are wild hairs going out. Just shape them, get them under control. Because many of them at this late date, they've been the entire growing season, they kind of get mangy looking. So these leaves that are spotted, those kinds of things, just clean them up. Be kind of, not brutal to them, but give them a good haircut. Kind of get them back under control. That way they don't take up the entire garage as you bring them indoors. Number 3 would be give them the big flush. There are things living in the soil. Worms, earwigs, fungus gnats, there's all kinds. You'll be amazed at what comes out as you bring those indoors. This is especially important if you're going to bring them into your house. Let's say an Arizona room, or just use them as a decoration. Some of your hibiscus. Some people use houseplants outdoors during the growing season and bring them back in for the winter season. Things get into that soil, eggs get laid. I don't know how they get there, they just magically show up. Soil is a living, breathing thing and things are attracted to it. And so if you give it a lot of water, even more than normal, till you flush some of that stuff out. An indication or example would be right now, with the rains, you'll see earthworms start coming up out of the ground and just going across. I don't know where they're going, but they're trying to get out of the water. They're getting drowned. And so they're trying to get some air. You can do the same principle by flushing that water through the root zone, so much so that you actually see it running out of the base, out of that drain hole at the bottom. So really flush it. We're trying to get rid of some of those things. You won't get rid of all of them. You're just trying to thin the numbers. Yeah. I would say if you're going to bring them indoors, everything. Cactus are okay with one big flush. There's going to be insects and stuff in there. It pertains to everything. Really flush them out. Okay. Now we want to clean things up. A couple products that I use while I'm cleaning things up. One, I'll take after I've pruned them all up, I'll spray the whole foliage area with Home Harvest. This is an organic. It's a neem oil. I would do this several days before I bring it inside because neem has an odor to it that is, I don't know, earthy, kind of organic smell that isn't necessarily nice with the leather sofas in there and your big screen TVs. You kind of want to spray it before as it gets time to air out. The benefit of neem oil, this Home Harvest, is it covers mildews, spores, spotting. It takes disease, coats the spores and keeps them from spreading. And it also kills off eggs of insects and any insects that are just there on the plant. Mealybugs, things that are on the plant. You really want to spray that because the last thing you want to do is have a spider egg hatch while you bring it indoors where it's warm, and all of a sudden your thing is covered in spiders, which I've had that happen more than once. So just kind of watch that one. So this takes care of the foliage. The biggest culprit, the number one nemesis, if you're bringing plants indoors, actually, as we transition, if you've got plants indoors, it is highly, highly likely you're going to have fungus gnats. A little tiny black gnat. They come inside looking to keep warm, and they can get into any nook or cranny. They just find a way of getting in. They go right through screens, right through, and they're coming into your house. And they start bugging you. If you look at the iPad, they're attracted to the light, to the computer screens, to the TV screens, to the windows. They'll just be attracted to light sources, and they'll bug you. They'll just be there flying in your face. The larva stage is a maggot, a little tiny white worm that lives in the soil. And they live off of your plant's roots. That's what they're mainly eating your roots. They can actually kill a plant if let go and let to infest a plant long enough. So you do want to thin them out. They're not just a nuisance to you, they're a nuisance to your houseplants. So before I bring them in, I'll sprinkle this systemic granules on top of the soil, and I'll water this in. After I give it the big flush, I'll put this on and then let it water in, and this will kill off any remaining insects that are in the actual soil. So it really does a number on fungus gnats, the number one culprit. If you have houseplants, let's say you're not bringing plants from the outside to the inside, this is our number one solution. So we'll sell cases and cases of this, and between now and the end of November, cases and cases. We're stocked up because we know it's coming. So to my friends, just put it on your radar, let them know, just know, oh, okay, Ken mentioned that. I've seen that, I know what that is, fungus gnats. The solution is systemic granules. Okay. After it's been inside, let's say it's adjusted for the shade for a while, then watch and start bringing it. I think you could bring it in anytime. I would say plants you want to store, really watch the weatherman. He'll tell you when you have the drop dead date is. It's going to be around Halloween. Quite often, the kids are out trick-or-treating and there's a nip in the air. That's going to nip your plants as well. So kind of watch that one. I would say you've got about 2 weeks to make this transition before you have to bring the things indoors or protect things. You could cover them with a sheet for a night or two, but that only gets you down to maybe mid-20s. If we go down to mid-20s for a night or two, or we stay there, the plants get zipped no matter how you protect them, unless you bring them indoors where an area where it does not freeze, garage, crawl space, Arizona room, something like that. Okay, question?
Yeah, I've got like a bay leaf and another hellebore.
Right.
That won't stay out. But can I bring them in close to my house and protect them
good idea.
That way?
So she's saying her borderline plants.
Yeah.
Could she, instead of bringing them indoors, could she simply put them up next to the house? And is there enough insulation or warmth given off by the house to protect it? Yes, that's a very good idea. So I do that. I really watch for my own containers. We have, I don't know, 2-3 dozen containers, a lot of them. It's innumerable. And I have a lot of borderline zone 7 kind of plants in containers. They're more exposed than normal. So figs, I've got a 5-7-year-old fig. It's got a trunk on it like this in a big jade green pot. It's been in there for years and years. About 3-4 years ago, I don't know if you remember, if you were here, we went sub-zero for like a week straight. It was brutally cold. Water pipes were freezing like crazy. Things deep froze. What I did for my figs, I was worried about it. I did exactly what you said. I brought it right up close to the house, which normally I don't do. It's a big pot. It's heavy. It's awkward. I don't want to do that kind of work. I leave it where it is. But if I see a winter storm is coming that goes to 0 or below, I'll actually move that up close to the house, and it does protect it quite well.
Do you need to still put something over it?
I don't cover it, but I own a garden center, so if I actually lose the plant, I go, man, I want to do it anyway. I want to try something. I'll do a little bit of work, but I don't go all out for myself. Protecting, covering it, if you go deep freeze like that, a covering's not going to help. It's going to deep freeze right through the container. The most important thing you can do for plants is stay outdoors. Now this example we've had today, what we're explaining are the tropicals, the non-hardy plants. Most of my plants are hardy. They stay right out. They stay where they are year-round. So roses stay where they're at. Any kind of little tree, Japanese maples, ivies, they all stay out there. If you want to save your dahlias, your geraniums, the soft things, those things you want to bring indoors. Or you just let them go and come to Waters Garden Center, put a new one in next spring. That's another option too. Or give them to family and friends down in Phoenix. We do that all the time with quite a number. I mean, truckloads go to Phoenix of our own plants, and then they come back. Where are we going with? Oh, the most important thing, water. This is counterintuitive, but if you hear the weatherman going, it's going to be a cold one. Oh boy, storm's coming from the north. Oh, it's going to be so cold. You know, people hit the grocery stores, they wipe out all the foods, they're just stocking up for, you know, the events. I go out and I make sure I water all of my plants before that system hits. A hydrated plant goes to the cold just fine. A dry plant cannot, and here's a reason why. The plants have antifreeze naturally built into the structure of the plant. If the plant is dry, it can't move that antifreeze up and down the structure of the plant, and so it'll, what we call winter burn or top burn, or the tops of the plants will die off because it didn't have enough moisture to keep that antifreeze pushed up into the structure of the plant. So you'll see this winter damage. It can happen in the landscape as well, but it really is pronounced in your container gardens because you're exposed more from the roots, the top, it's just more exposed. So water those plants before the storm hits. You'll find your plants come through just fine, like champs. Okay? Okay, you've got the subject, that's it. That's all there is. That's how you bring plants indoors. It's not rocket science. It's just a couple sequential steps, and the main thing would be watch the bugs, because you will have a lot of them. If you just bring the plant right from outdoors, you'll have worms crawling across the kitchen, you'll have earwigs up in the pantry, you'll have roly-poly pill bugs crawling across if you don't take a few precautions. So just clean up, shape, kill off the insects, then make the big move. How do you clean up your containers? Let's cover that one. So especially terracotta, your glazed pots, things like this blue glaze, they really aren't too bad. They'll get a little dirty. You can just wipe them down. They'll clean out. The terracotta gets that white, crusty buildup. There's some techniques on that. One, I mentioned that in the handout. Mineral oil, just take a rag and wipe it down. It'll take that white stuff right off. Sometimes Pam or your kitchen oils, a spray, I'll spray that on. It makes things look bright and new. It'll kind of get rid of some of that white crusty stuff. It's quite effective at making it look newer, not new. I like a little bit of the white. Just makes it look like it's ancient, like the garden's been there for decades. But I don't like it crusty where it looks dirty. I don't like that. So I'll try to get most of that off. But it cleans things up pretty well. So take a light oil and wipe it on those clays. It can work on your glazed pots as well, but then it gets slick, and when you pick them up, they're hard to handle. So I really just wipe down with a cleaner my glazed pots. But the terracottas clean up quite nicely with a mineral oil or some kind of kitchen oil in the kitchen. Okay? It may also be time, before you bring it in, if things have gotten a little root bound, this is the time to start making that transition to upsize the pot. Especially if you notice as you're cleaning things up, there's a lot of yellow leaves, a lot of dead. It just looks more wispy, not as full as it used to. Those are all indications the plant is root bound. Now, don't go crazy with this. You don't want to go from a little pot, from this size pot, to huge, or the plant will stop growing on the top growth. It'll focus all of its energy on putting out roots. Many of these plants, especially house plants, tropical plants, hibiscus, they like to be root bound. They really won't bloom or perform for you at the top growth until they reach a limit on the roots. Then all of a sudden, then they'll start to grow their top growth. So really, when we're transplanting container plants, we just want to go the next size up. So maybe an inch or two, just the next size. Don't go humongous. That's the best advice I can give you on that one. The best materials, if it's an indoor plant, I don't think it matters. I don't really care for plastic so much, especially if it's going to be indoors. It just looks cheap, looks not as quality. I like the glaze, I like terracottas, I like wood. I've seen tin, iron, all of those can be good examples of growing plants, especially if they're not going to be outdoors during the freeze and thaw. If they're outdoors, you really do, if you're going to keep them outdoors, really stay away from your clay. The terracotta clay, Italian, German, Mexican clays, they crack, they flake. As the water gets in that clay and it freezes and thaws, that water expands, it just wreaks havoc on your clay pots. The difference would be this kind of pot here. These are good clays. These are Asian clays. These have a high fired, very dense clay. These do go through the winter just fine. So glaze, I would say okay, either from Malaysia, China, Vietnam, any of those type of glaze pots. Most of them are good quality clays that'll stay right outdoors. I've got some cobalt blue pots that have been outdoors for 7-8 years, and they're still going strong. I'm almost getting bored with them. They're like, it's been there for a long time. You just want to change it up sometimes. But this is a classic color. It never goes out of style. This has been #1 seller for like 5 years straight. Cobalt blue. Eventually, I think another color is going to take over. But even reds, the aquas, they are not, this is still #1. So, good quality clay. Okay, how to shift up. If you're going to shift up, make sure that you're using you want some fresh potting soil. Get a good quality potting soil. We make our own here. This is one we put together years ago. This is our recipe made for here. It reacts really well to clay. It's a challenge. Potting soils are difficult. You want them to stay moist, but you want them to breathe so that the plants can root. If they stay too soggy, the plants root, they dampen off, or they root rot, or they start to struggle. If it stays too dry, it's hard to rehydrate. It's a fine line. The science is in the soils and how good your plants grow or not grow, which is really a challenge in an arid climate. Most potting soils, especially national brands, they're made for the East Coast where it's more humid. So they tend to stay too moist, or they just get bone dry, the soil shrivels, and you can never rehydrate the things. So it's really a challenge. Use a good quality potting soil. I like Fox Farms, I like the Black Golds, but I'm really partial to my own. So get a good quality. This may be too big a bag for a lot of you. We've got little sizes too. Growwell puts together a nice soil. But we really research the soils. We actually will test them to see which ones grow best. We'll put them side by side. We'll take a flat of marigolds. We'll just watch which plants perform the best in soils. That's the biggest advice I give you if you're going to do container gardening. Watch your soil. They are not all the same. They often will take shortcuts and they'll pull too much perlite out, those little white specks. That's the most expensive ingredient in a potting soil. So they tend to thin that out where they'll change the grade. And so all of a sudden it doesn't aerate as well. So the plants won't root as well. Peat moss is expensive. They'll put more compost instead of peat moss. There's a recipe for it. Just like fancy your grandmother's chocolate chip cookies. There's a famous recipe that goes down from generation to generation. Soils are the same way. There's a recipe that makes it all go together. Fertilizers, there's certain things that work well. But watch that one. Don't go too big. Fill in it with some fresh potting soil. You want to add some in there. Shall we go over some new plants? Some new things that can be right out there? So Lisa and I, we're on the search constantly for plants that will go down to 0 degrees. Zone 7, zone 6, that's our zones. That are drought hardy and evergreen. Wouldn't that be the magic bullet? We can find some more plants like that. So we've found a few of them. We've toured farms. We roam the countryside at different farms looking for plants and some exciting new ones. Let's just show you. And then I'll show you some of my favorites that I just use all the time. But some of the newbies, the brand new plants you've never seen before. This one is Eternal Sunshine Abelia. Now Abelias, we grow a lot of Abelias. This one has that fancy yellow foliage. It's not variegated. Actually, the new growth comes out yellow, and then it greens up like an Abelia. I like Abelia, especially in containers, because it's a little plant. It gets about knee-high by knee-high, maybe a little bit taller. You can easily keep it shaped, but the bloom cycle on this, it blooms from April through the end of fall. Amazingly long bloom cycle. And then it'll hold its foliage. Oh, I broke it. That's no good. And then it will hold its foliage well into winter. It is deciduous. It'll lose its foliage, but not for long. Then it reemerges very, very early in spring. And so it always has a lot of interesting things going on. But Abelia, this one's called Eternal Sunshine. I just liked it because it was, usually we have kaleidoscope. It's a variegated variety. That's how they get the yellow. This one's truly got a gold hue to it. But if you put this next to say a dark colored pot, look how it pops. I mean, just one plant, it just looks good with any kind of bright color, this plant's going to shine.
Does it need sun, a lot of sun?
It'll take sun to shade. It blooms more if you give it more sun. It can be right out there in full sun to two more shaded. Amelia. This I'm actually excited about. This is a new plant. This is performed. Friends of mine that have garden centers in Utah, Colorado, the Sierras, this plant has, it could overtake manzanitas, some of those things. It's called Distillium. They don't have a good name for it yet. Distillium, just think distillery. This is a nice evergreen plant. The reason it's so drought hardy, heat tolerant, is because it's got a real thick, waxy leaf to it. And so it's evergreen. The new growth will be a little red to it. So it's kind of like a red tip photinia, not that red, but much easier to maintain than a red tip photinia, and it doesn't get the diseases, the mildews, the insects. We're finding it's very tolerant of the western climates, arid climates. This one's called linebacker Distillium. Gets up about chest high, about this wide, nice green, could be a privacy, could be in a raised bed. But I think this is going to be, I'm going to push this over the next year. But no one's planted one of these yet, not even myself, because it just came in like 2 days ago. So Distillium. This is a linebacker. This one is called, I had another Distillium right here. Vintage Jade. Has a gold tinge to it. Same leaf, very thick, waxy leaf, which means it's not going to perspire in an arid climate, so you can adapt to the dry climates. So again, loves heat, loves sun, surround it with asphalt. This is going to do great. This one's called Vintage Jade, and it stays a little lower. It gets only about knee high and a little bit wider. So if you got a raised bed or a hill you want it to drape down over, be a good plant. One thing I don't know, I'm going to plant one across the street, test it with javelina. That one, deer and javelina, we got to check that. I don't think they're going to eat it, but proof's in the pudding, so we'll know here in a couple weeks how it does. I've got a herd of javelina across the street. They're wreaking havoc. Not that they're eating anything, they're just digging it up for fun. Just kind of, we put it back in the ground. I think they're after the grubs in the gardens. There were lots of pulling out grubs this big. I think they're in digging up. You know how javelina will rototill the soil, looking for worms, insects, and grubs. So I killed those off, and I think I'm going to see less activity during the next week or two. This is a new dogwood. Now dogwoods do very well. The shrubby dogwoods do very well in the mountains of Arizona. This goes down to minus 40 degrees, I think. Some crazy man cold. This is called cardinal. I think it's just called cardinal dogwood. Yeah, that's it, cardinal dogwood. It's cardinal in that the stems, this is actually a prettier plant without its foliage than it is with the foliage. So it has this beautiful autumn color to it. It'll drop, but then as it matures, this plant will become, the stems will become redder and redder. Like bright stems, like you want to take some off and put them in an arrangement in the house. This is a great little plant. I noticed that dogwoods do not perform that well in the heat of the day. So if you're planting them in the mountains, it's probably best, at least at higher elevations, it's probably best to put them in an east, north to west exposure. Keep them out of that direct sun exposure underneath the canopy of a tree where it gets morning sun, midday shade, and then afternoon sun would do great. So containers underneath that entrance to your house where it's just protected a little bit in a pot where you got these red twigs coming out, put some twinkle lights for the holidays. It'd be really pretty.
How big do they get?
This can get up to about chest higher, so about somewhere in here, 5 to 6 foot level is about right.
But in a pot, you can keep it down.
Yeah, you could easily keep this trimmed down to 3 foot or so, very easily. It's not a real aggressive plant. Just cardinal dogwood, just a new plant. I do use a lot of mums. I love mums. These are perennials. If you use a hardy mum, I plant these in containers and I never bring them indoors. I just keep them out there and they get magnificent. I mean, mums can get this big around and covered in flowers. They're awe-inspiring. In a bigger pot, so I've got some that are in big square pots with this great big round plant. Again, if you're going to keep your hardy perennials, this is a hardy mum, so it's made to go down to I think minus 20 or 30 degrees. It will die back to the roots, and I'll cut it off about. I actually will keep the structure up through about January, after a few storms in midwinter, the snows will start to tear it up and it starts to look kind of mangy. That's my cue, whack it off. When you cut it back, what you'll find is you'll start to see little green stems. Next spring's growth, even in January and February, you'll start to see green stems starting to emerge. So, but that's a great little plant. Now, a lot of folks will say, nip off the first buds, make it really complicated so it can bloom a little later. I just fertilize it and let it do its own thing. I'm not going to try to control it. And it almost has a double bloom cycle if you do that. It'll bloom late summer, then it'll come back and have another wave of blooms. Right now they're in full bloom. Asters and mounds both. Isn't that pretty? I mean, that's not a big enough pot, obviously, for a mum. I've got mine in some pretty big ones. And I didn't intend that. I took small mums, but they kept filling in. It's like Darwin's experiment to see which one, what takes over. That's kind of one of those. This is another one that I'm very excited about. This comes out of New Zealand, a high range of New Zealand. This will go down to 0 degrees. It's called a hebe, H-E-B-E. Evergreen, very thick, waxy leaf again. This one gets up, this is called silver dollar hebe, gets up about 2 feet high, about 4 feet wide. It's kind of a low mounding plant, full sun, just exposed out there. I think this will look great in containers. I'm going to try some of these in my own pots. But it just looks like it belongs in Arizona, doesn't it? Isn't that neat? Yeah. Doesn't smell, I don't know. This one might be javelina, I don't know. It's got kind of fleshy. We'll test it out here shortly. So I'm a strong believer in one test victim. If you've got heavy javelina and deer populations, try one before you commit to 5 or 6 of them. Just see how it does. And then if they leave it alone, you can go for it. So I'll try one of those. This is another from that same family. We're going to introduce quite a few of these. Again, these have not been sold in this market yet, but I'm hearing very good word in the higher elevations of the other parts of the Rockies. They're doing great. Again, full sun exposure. These are alpine kind of plants. So it just looks good. I think this would be a great replacement for a boxwood. Boxwood's kind of boring, same old green plant. And you only get one color, green. Here we get silvers, greens. Some of the new growth on some varieties are red. You get different coloration, seasonality to them. So nice, gosh, you just want to pet it. Again, another variety of hebe. So I'm going to bring these in just to see how they're going to do this winter. But I think they look like they're going to do really, really well for us. Again, all of these will go down to 0 degrees, no problem. And take the sun, take the dryness. So it's nice everywhere. I wish they would bloom. They had flowers this big on them. They'd be the ideal plants. They don't bloom. This is another new one. This is called snowberry. This is actually a drought-hardy plant. It's deciduous. It will lose its foliage, but it holds these berries. It had berries on it for over a month. It'll hold them right through winter. Like you can see, it's actually forming more berries as it goes through the season. The fall colors are bright aspen gold, and then it just holds these, and I believe the birds will eat these up come midwinter. So just an unusual drought-hardy plant. So this would be more of a zero scheme. Get it started. You could almost neglect it. It would come back, gets up about head high again, 5-6 foot level, and about that big around.
Full sun.
Full sun. Yep. I would say at least 6 hours of sun, where you're not going to get the berries on it like you want. You're buying that plant for the berries. Without the sun, you're not going to get the berries. Okay. This is a new Mugo pine. Now Mugo pines, I've sold so many thousands of them, I'm just bored. Low mounding evergreen. Mugo pines are usually about this tall and they kind of mound like this. They just have this wide spreading thing. And pines look good. We're in the pine forest, so pines do really great. This is called Tannenbaum Mugo pine. It's a dwarf pine, but it has a central leader to it. So it'll actually form like a mini Christmas tree. Very slow growing, doesn't take over, and it's not going to get the spider mites like Alberta spruce and some of these other smaller dwarf conifers. This one's going to be a really nice, this grows maybe 3 inches a year growth. And so it just stays, it keeps its bound, but it forms this nice, it'll get up about this tall, perfect little Perfect little Christmas tree looking pine. Great pine tree for you. If you want something close to the house, you can't plant these big spruce. They're these big evergreens because they'll just take over. They'll take over the walkways, not this little guy. So again, it doesn't grow mounding, it grows upright. Very, very unusual for a mugo pine. Brand new, I've not even sold one of those yet. They just came in. I'm very excited. I don't get excited about plants very often, but those are a few of the brand new things. Here's some of my old favorites. These guys, I'm transitioning right now. I don't want my zinnias to live. They're gonna die in 2 weeks. I'm pulling them out. If anything even remotely looks out of place, struggling, stop blooming, I rip it out of the ground. And I'm looking to put in cold hardy plants. These are ornamental kales. These guys love snow. They love, in fact, these are the most beautiful plants. You put a dusting of snow on top of this, it looks magical. And this plant loves that. It loves the cold. In the spring of the year, it'll look like this right through winter. Usually in May to first part of June, they'll start to bolt. They'll get these real tall yellow flowers. They're super fragrant. In fact, often we'll design these at the front entrance of hotels, like some place where you're entering, where you can smell the plant as you enter. This has a lot of character to it, but there's lots of colors, whites, purples, greens, but they're basically an ornamental cabbage. So cabbages, they taste better when they're planted when it's cold. Well, these guys look better when they're cold. They're not really edible. They are edible, they're just bitter tasting. So don't eat them. But they're just made to be pretty. Pretty.
Do the Adelina like those?
Javelinas absolutely think they've died and gone to heaven. They're putting one of those out. They will search them out. So you've got to put them in, like I put them in the backyard where it's fenced in. They will search them out. They will hop over fences. They'll look to get in to eat kale. They love cabbages. That's just their favorite thing. They don't eat this one though. So if you like fragrance, this is a flowering stock. Very, very fragrant. Comes in pretty colors, and I don't know why, but it looks like Javelina won't want to eat this. They don't, they leave them alone. They're right there in my front yard where they're exposed, and they're fine. And this does better in a container because it brings it up. You can actually enjoy the fragrance, you can get to it easier, and it's just pretty. Stock, S-T-O-C-K, flowering stock. Yeah. So it kind of looks like a snapdragon. I don't know if I have snaps here. Yeah, snapdragon. Kind of looks like a snapdragon. It's a tall thing. It's up about this tall or so, 18 inches, 24 inches or so. But same thing with this. Every yard needs at least one snapdragon. And animals don't eat this. Again, it looks delicious, but for some reason, they don't like the taste. It comes in every color you could think of, from reds to pinks to whites to yellows. So they're companion plants to each other. They full sun. They like the sun. I would think every yard needs pansies, violas, Johnny jump ups. I don't know why they call these pansies. These are actually violas. They're cousin of the pansy, but they love cold. They just shine. In the snow, you'll see these little flowers poking up through the snow. They love the cold. Most folks plant these at the wrong time of the year. They'll come in May and get the last crop of pansies because they've been looking at these for months. And they'll buy that last few in the table, and then they die come June, July. They don't like the heat. These like the cold. The best time to plant these, October. This is when you want to plant them. You put them in the ground, you get them filled out. They'll kind of lock whatever's by mid-December, whatever plant you have, that's what you're going to get. Whatever flowers are on it, that's what stays. And it stays that way for about 2 months. By Valentine's, about mid-February, they start to take off again. They just start growing. And by mid-April, they are humongous, just covered in flowers. So lots and lots of colors to pick from. I put these at the front edge of my containers because they stay real low and they kind of spill out and kind of soften up the edges of my containers. With these, I'm looking to pull my marigolds and put these in. So I'm looking to transition to more. So I've got something pretty to look at in mid-January when it's 18 degrees out and I'm sitting there sipping coffee, eating fresh cookies. I can look outside and think about gardens to come. So it gives me some inspiration. I use a lot of these. There's a lot of varieties here. Someone had mentioned heuchera or coral bells. Is someone growing these? These
Mine was
hellebores, excuse me. That's right. These are heuchera or coral bells. They actually will get a flower. It comes up like a coral bell, but I plant them for the foliage. These are a perennial. They come back every year, but they come in all these funky, different colors, from burgundy to lime greens. I plant a lot of these as foundational plants in my containers because they always look good, and they're evergreen. They'll keep this foliage right through winter. Shade or sun, I find them, they'll go wherever. We used to think they were just shade, but I find I've got one in a pot, big, I mean, it's a big pot. And I planted as just one. It's turned into this monster. It's glorious, and it's been in bloom since April. Hundreds and hundreds of blooms coming up out of this, which is beautiful. It's a copper-colored one I have, but they all seem to perform the same way. In winter, if we get a really harsh cold, it can look a little beat up, so I'll go through and usually I'll just trim it, fertilize it right afterwards in March, April, and then it comes back with fresh new, or I'll just hand pick the dead foliage out of there, and it just comes back. It looks really good. So heuchera. And just to think outside the box, a couple things. I use a lot of the Swiss chard. It's ornament. This is edible, but it also can be ornamental. So it has these bright reds or yellows, or lettuce. I love using lettuce in containers. Again, these both love the cold. But look how pretty that is. You put this with, gosh, kind of anything. Here. It just look good. Just looks good together. And companion plants, these guys both love each other. So this is a mum with speckled, and you can eat this. Just go out and nibble on the plants. So again, watch this. Javelina will like to eat this. So will deer, so will everything. But I use a lot of edibles in my container. I'll use beans as a draping plant in my summer gardens. So you can have fun with it. You think outside the box. With that, I think we've covered the topics that we want to cover today. Can I give you a couple last bits of advice? What? Oh yeah, camellias. That's what we're talking about. Yeah. These came in yesterday. I only get one shipment a year. Camellias. You Californians love your camellias. I lived in California for a number of years. I grew a lot of different varieties of camellias. Unfortunately, camellia doesn't grow here, except for this variety. It's the only hardy camellia. This goes down again, zone 7, goes down to 0 degrees. I've had several of these for many, many years. They grow exceptionally well, and they bud up and bloom like crazy. Hundreds of flowers. It's also a winter bloomer. So it blooms usually after the new year, February, March, April. That's its window. One of the first things out of the box to bloom in year. Even before forsythia, before quince, this one's in bloom. So before rhododendrons, this one's in bloom. Nice evergreen. You do want to place these in the right place. These are more of a shade lover. They can get a little leaf burned. They'll get scorched if you put them out in too much sun. They'll take a little sun, but they seem to perform better in more shaded areas. North side of the house, with the canopy, at that entrance where you got that north side entrance is kind of covered. That's a perfect space for camellias. You can easily maintain them down to hedge height, hip high or so. You just let them go. They'll tend to get up about head high. Slow growers, but performers. They just bud up. They bud so nicely. So it's kind of exciting. I only get one crop of these a year because the farms that grow these have very strict ag inspection. So you only get one load a year. This is when I get them. What I have, that's all I'm going to have for the year. So buy them early. Don't wait till spring because I won't have any of them. They'll all be gone. Okay. Camellias, reds or whites. It's pretty much the only two colors you get. There might be a pink or an apple blossom color. Basically, those are your choices. A little bit smaller flower. It's about that size. Whereas your regular tropical hibiscus, you get that great big flower. Used to float them in a bowl of water. Beautiful. So, okay, a couple things that I'm doing in my own gardens, just to kind of watch. So this morning I was out gardening. I'm taking advantage of the rain. Fertilized. I was out, my whole yard is now fertilized. I went out this morning, put that down on everything. From the thyme lawn to my fruit trees, everything got this, and the rain is taking it in. The Mexican primrose, the sumacs, everything got this morning, okay? My neighbor's thinking crazy out there in the rain. I mean, it's pouring down rain. I got my rain jacket, my big hat, just out there sprinkling away. And then I put my weed and grass preventer down. I hate weeding. Weeding is work. Oh my gosh. That's the curse, right? Adam, stupid Adam, ate the apple, and Eve followed him, and we've had weeds ever since. So this keeps weeds at bay. So this is, you got to put this down before. This is a seed killer, not a weed killer. So I put this in my hand spreader and just walk around, and any space that's open, you can put this right around your trees, right over your perennials, right around the edge of my thyme lawn. I put it in all those areas where I tend to get weeds. This will keep the seed from germinating. Because that seed sends off that taproot, it keeps it from getting in the soil, so I don't have weeds. So I put this on everything. Foxglove is gonna grow like crazy, not foxglove, foxtail. You know, the one that has a burr that goes through your sock and wants to go through your ankle and come out the other side? That is a winter weed. This rain will start them to start. As soon as we get cool, we get some moisture, that thing starts taking off. Dandelions are already growing, they're already this big. So I don't like dandelions, so I want them out of my yard. So we get rid of those. It takes care of all of those guys, okay? Just don't put it where you want your wildflowers to grow. Because again, it keeps seed from germinating. It doesn't keep grass or plants already up or roses already growing. It doesn't do anything to a plant already established. It only affects weeds, the seed piece. That, and watch, lastly, this rain is going to make snails and slugs go crazy. So kind of watch that. If you have snail and slug issues, let's say big beds of vinca, ivy, there's certain things they really get into. Watch that. This is an organic slug and snail bait. You sprinkle it out in those beds. But one snail or slug can lay 1,000 eggs. So they go from just a few to overtake a bed in very short order, and they like cool, moist weather. That's what we have, cool, moist weather. Just kind of watch that one. Just put it on your radar. That's all I got for you today, folks. Last questions. Ooh, good class. We just soaked it all in, no questions. I'll kind of hang out. I did just plant a thyme lawn. I brought, this is creeping thyme. I've got an office across the street that I'm landscaping, turning into gardens, display gardens. If you want to take a tour, I'd be glad to go show it off to you so you can see what's going on. We put it at 18-foot centers, sub-irrigated on a drip system. So it just planted like hours ago, literally. So I think they're already starting to grow. It's kind of fun, but if you want to see what a thyme lawn looks like, I'd be glad to walk you over. And you can kind of take a look to see what the javelina are leaving alone. It's because we've got display beds over there for about 2 weeks. And they have been active. There's little footprints, probably even there today, going in and eating, sampling things, see if they like it. Okay? With that, I'll take the group over and we'll answer questions on the fly. If you want to see that, if not, take off and you're all set. Thanks, you all. Oh, you can clap. Yeah. So my goal right here, this is not a landscape, this is a garden. So it's made to look richer than normal. Here we're putting together plants that are drought hardy. Once they get established, little to no care, and I don't want to be a slave to trimming, pruning, primping. I don't want to be doing all that. So I want to be able to work and sell plants, talk about them, not slave over them. So I want to be pretty but low maintenance. And we have very heavy javelina population here. There's a herd of 15 that roam around. And this fence around the garden center, it's not made to keep people out. It's made to keep wildlife out. So if we leave a gate open, man, they are in like that. So these plants have been heavily ravaged over the last couple weeks, and they look good. So they're doing fine. So all these, I would say, are javelina and deer proof. They aren't going to nibble. They've nibbled on a couple of them. So right here you see the echinaceas. They tried. And they said, I don't like those, they moved on. They ate a couple of the sedums, so autumn joy sedums they ate. They nibbled on one of these society garlics. They pulled it out of the ground, and then they didn't eat it. They just pulled it out of the ground. I think they're looking for grubs. They're looking for the grubs. So I went through and I put a grub killer through here so I don't have any grubs and protein sources for them. But it looks like we've got a good mix of plants that they are not going to eat. Crepe myrtles, grasses, salvias, just a mixture of stuff. You notice I put a lot of heucheras and coral bells that we mentioned in the class. Underneath the canopy of this tree, we've got a cuba. Very unusual plant. It looks tropical, like something you'd find in California. This thing goes down to -0 degrees, easy, no problem. And it looks like this year round. It just likes the shade. So lots of different mixtures. What I wanted to bring you over and show you was the thyme lawn, right over here. So this was plugged literally yesterday afternoon, actually all day yesterday. We were plugging thyme. We just took 6 packs, and we have sub-irrigation soaker hose buried underneath the ground. So this is on its own valve, and that's on its other valve. So I wanted something, I didn't want rock, it just looks so sterile. But I didn't want high maintenance, and I don't want to mow. So thyme is pretty much evergreen. It will have a yellow, or not yellow, a pink flower on it through the summer. And so it's just low maintenance. I water it about every 10 days. It's on a drip system, sub-irrigated. By next spring, this will overgrow and it'll just be a solid mat of creeping thyme, about this tall, that will just look good all the time without any care. That's my kind of ground cover. I like that. You can walk on it. The dogs go on it. Gets a little bit of dog spotting. My own yard at home, but it recovers very, very quickly. But I also have big dogs. Several of them. So I don't know if you've seen Vincent, the black lab that roams around. He likes to pee in the thyme lawn. He's a big dog. He can spot it just a touch, but not too bad. So again, drought hardy, and I know that javelina don't eat herbs. So I know they're going to leave this alone and not be a problem. So kind of feel free to walk over and monitor, see how it's doing. Again, it's just been plugged. I want to get it started to be rooted before it gets cold by the end of November. So we're doing a lot of planting right now. Today I'll probably plant a couple trees over here. We'll plant a couple of the new specimens that we were just showing off to you, just to see how they do. Questions?
Yeah, how does this work on a hill? Pretty good?
Yeah, real tough. Just how do you water things on a hill?
Because
usually a soaker hose is how you do
on
it.
that hill, and I want to stop it.
Yeah.
What I put in there is not working.
Yeah. There I generally have used something a little more aggressive than this. I would use like a cotoneaster for erosion control. Some of your creeping junipers, great erosion because they're really deep rooted. Whereas thyme has only got a root on it, not as deep.
Well, I'll see you. But this is a good time to plant something like that.
Excellent time. I mean, you're in a peak planting window. You just can't think of a better time.
Excellent.
You bet. See you later.